Chapter 69. What is mana? Time soon passed, and with the rising of the new sun, the festivities soon ended. All around the empire, elves lay drunk, arm in arm with smiles and tears in their eyes, drinking away the loss of their comrades, drinking in hopes for a better tomorrow. It was truly a night to remember, as everyone let out their inner hearts. And now, standing in front of an all-green carriage, pulled by two white horses, Damien, Eleanor, Lyra, and Leona stood in a circle. The only difference now was that, different from her former appearance, over the course of the night, Lyra's skin and hair had turned a faint gray color. Yes, the night had ended. After waking up, Lyra noticed with surprise that not only had her ability awakened, but her skin color had changed as well. Everyone was surprised by the situation, but, understanding what had happened, each person remained silent and did not ask questions. Only Leona, who had never experienced the contract gem, was confused. "Young lord, what happened to Sister Lyra? How did her skin turn gray overnight? Also, why do you smell a bit like her? Before you smelled like Sister Isabel only, now you have a hint of Sister Lyra too." Sniffing over Damien's shoulder, Leona's lion ears twitched in confusion as she could not understand what was going on. As a beast man, especially a lion-kin, she was familiar with the smells of people she met. However, this was the first time she was experiencing someone's smell change. Not only change, but smell similar to another person. Lost in thought, her golden eyes darted between the two, trying to figure out what was going on. Unfortunately, Damien, who was suddenly asked this question, was at a loss for what to say. After all, despite being close to Eleanor and Alfred, he wasn't sure if letting them know the changes in his abilities was a good idea. Considering it was a power that could potentially get an unlimited amount of abilities and powerful subordinates, it was enough to make even the closest brothers turn blades against each other. Damn, what do I say? Cursing inwardly, Damien realized he was stuck between a rock and a hard place. And Eleanor, seeing this, couldn't help but let out a light chuckle. "Haha, Leona, your young lord has some secrets, so don't ask too much. I'm sure he'll tell you when he's ready." Ruffling her hair, Eleanor's smile remained wide for some reason. Seeing this monster kid in front of her put her in an awkward position, which made her happy. So much so that while ruffling Leona's hair, she gave both him and Lyra a wink as if to say, "It's fine, I'll keep you secret for you." Instantly seeing this, Damien just sighed. Indeed, doing such a thing in the presence of two seventh-order powerhouses without wanting to be discovered was simply child's play. Thinking of this, it won't surprise me if Alfred also knew. Muttering in his mind, Damien turned his eyes to Alfred's position, and sure enough, the old steward was looking at him with an equally sly smile. It seemed his guess was correct. Yesterday night's events were completely seen by both of them. I should have guessed as much. If anything, that flower bed we woke up on should have been the easiest clue that Eleanor was there. Anywho, it's not a big deal either way. After all, at least for now, none of them are my enemies, he thought. However, Lyra, behind him, was currently in shock as she listened to Eleanor and Lona's words. Unknowingly, her face had turned a shade of red, and her elf ears perked up to the sky. "WWW, what are you talking about? What kind of secret could I and this kid keep?" Waving her hands in exclamation, Lyra tried to defend herself. However, her actions just made her more unbelievable. Even Isabel, behind her, who had been silent all this while, couldn't help but roll her eyes at Lyra. "Come on, don't you know you're making things worse? It's obvious you got contracted to the young master. You're lucky Leona isn't that smart, otherwise she would have seen right through you." Muttering slightly, Isabel turned to look at Damien. Although she didn't know why, knowing her young master had contracted someone else apart from her, for some reason, she felt uncomfortable. Even if she knew it was inevitable, she felt she was not special anymore. A situation which Damien would have corrected and reassured her about if he knew. Unfortunately, he was currently in the middle of a discussion with Eleanor. Do you remember when we first started training? I added the condition that the only way I would allow you to go is if you tell me what mana is. So now I ask again, what is mana? Instantly, everyone fell silent when they heard this question, as they knew if he couldn't answer it, their journey could not begin. However, none of the girls worried, as they believed their young master would not let them down. Personally experiencing Damien's growth, they knew his understanding of mana would not be any less. And sure enough, hearing this question, Damien just laughed. Haha, mana. I remember last time I referred to the energy that exists everywhere, capable of leveraging the world's laws. However, while correct, that is too narrow to call the final answer. Raising a ball of shadow mana, Damien imitated Eleanor's move in the past. Mana is that and more. It's the extension of our desires and the reflection of our hearts. It's why some people's fire magic can hurt, while others can heal better. It's also why you could easily predict and counter my attacks before. You could sense the intent behind each attack and know where they were going to land. Someone who attacks without understanding mana is no different from informing the opponent behind where their attack is going to land. In simple terms, mana is the culmination of energy, intent, and imagination to change reality. In simple terms, mana is the culmination of energy, intent, and imagination to change reality. Clap, clap, clap. Hearing Damien's answer, Eleanor instantly burst into a bright smile. Although she had noticed it from their earlier fight, the kid in front of her was not the kid who had recklessly shouted names and thrown attacks 6 months ago. After training, he had finally begun to look a bit like a real powerhouse. Thinking of this, she couldn't help but feel satisfied. The little egg she kept was finally hatching. Indeed, kid, you're correct. However, since you know this, you should also know it's about time you break through fourth order, so let me tell you this. Narrowing her eyes, the atmosphere suddenly became heavy. Lyra subconsciously summoned her bow, Leona's claws extended, her hair standing on end, and Isabel's horns suddenly extended. Bearing the burnt aura of a seventh-order powerhouse, their bodies instantly sought to protect themselves. In fact, not just this kid, all of you should listen, she paused. The fourth order, unlike the first 3 orders, is just a process of accumulation and compression. The fourth order is where things change. Summoning a bird made out of life elements, Eleanor began to explain. In the road to gods, regardless of the ordinary path, be it aura, mana, or whatever, major breakthroughs exist in these 6 stages. Fourth order, seventh order, eighth order, ninth, demigod and god. At fourth order, you need to find out what your heart means. Is your heart full of killing? Then you need to imbue that killing intent into your mana core. Is it for protection? Then put that intent to protect into your core. Fourth order is the stage where you decide your future path, condense your intent, and imbue it in your mana. At this stage, every one of your attacks is filled with intent. It's also why a fireball from a fourth order and third order are miles apart in difference. To be honest, only monsters like you with dual cores and multiple abilities can fight against fourth order at third order. At fourth order, your very movements have intent imbued in them. Calmly explaining, Eleanor hoped they wouldn't make a mistake and go down the wrong path, as choosing an intent was something you could only do once in your lifetime. If they made a wrong choice, then their road going forward would be blocked forever, as the 5th and 6th stages involved increasing their mana and being more in tune with their intent and the world. For the 7th order, you then condensed your intent into a domain. However, that was currently too far for the current Damien and his gang, rather than worrying about something that was still far ahead. Eleanor hoped they would make the best choice regarding their intent. Remember, don't choose an intent because you think one is cool or powerful. If it's not the true reflection of your heart, then you will never be able to break through seventh order. Remember this final lesson today, and even the heavens cannot limit you. Giving them one final word of advice, Eleanor prepared to take her leave. As the queen of the elf empire, she had already wasted too much time training them. Right now, she has decided to change her previous strategy. To change the strategy the elves had held for centuries, shrinking into the forest of life and only being beaten casually. This time, inspired by the growth and vigor of the kids in front of them, she decided to fight back. Good luck, kid. Hopefully when we meet, you'll meet a different elf empire. Whispering slightly, she slowly went back into the mansion. However, before she could get too far, 4 distinct shouts came from behind her. Thank you, Master, for all you've done for us. Thank you, Master, for all you've done for us. Thank you, Master, for all you've done for us. Thank you, Master, for all you've done for us. Bowing in her direction, the 4 Damien, Isabel, Lyra, and Leona expressed their thanks. During these 6 months, Eleanor had not only guided them in increasing their strength, but she and Alfred had helped them grow emotionally as well. It was no exaggeration to call her master. And hearing this, Eleanor paused in her steps, her eyes watering a bit. These kids, she muttered. Hearing their shouts, she burst into a bright smile. Haha, master. If that guy Thuron knew I was your master, I'm sure he'd be shocked, Laughing happily, Eleanor was glad. All right then, since you call me master, then let me promise this to you. No matter what happens in the future, I and all the elves will be your biggest backing. If you ever need any help, just let me know. Also, if that drunken dwarf refuses to help you after giving him my letter, then use this gem to call me. By injecting mana into it, it should be able to talk to you guys. Throwing a green gem into Damien's hands, she didn't give them a chance to react. World Tree Art, Ascension to Heaven. Shouting loudly, she cast a spell that spawned a huge tree under her feet. In an instant, her body began to rise and rise until she reached the top of the World Tree. Also, Damien, about what I said about shouting the names of your attacks before. While it's foolish in a real battle, it can also be really cool. So be strong enough to easily crush your opponents regardless of whether they know your attacks or not. That way, like your dad, you can look cool while beating them up, haha. With one last burst of laughter, she directly ascended to the top, leaving Damien and the others standing in front of their carriage at a loss for words. Quite the eccentric personality she is, isn't she? Asked Alfred, who also witnessed the scene. It seemed there was a reason why she and his master were close. Looking at her laughing, for some reason, Alfred felt that at this moment she seemed very similar to his master Thuron. However, behind that same laughter, he could also sense a hint of sadness. Time soon passed, and with the exit of Eleanor, Damien and the others soon made their way to the carriage. Donning all black cloaks and a pure black mask showing only their pupils, they made their way out of the elf forest. With Alfred at the wheel, Damien and others began talking about their plans as they slowly trotted out of the empire. This mask is so hot. Stupid empire, making us hide our identities. If I get the opportunity, I wouldn't mind using my gravity to crush the entire imperial palace. Crossing her arms in anger, Isabel complained about how uncomfortably the black wooden mask stuck to her face. According to her characteristics of flame, Damien had given her one carved with an angry expression and a flame mark between its forehead. And although it looked cool, Isabel wished she didn't have to wear it. In fact, not only her, as none of the girls liked the cloak and mask, as they felt their movements and air being somewhat restricted. Sensing this, Damien is instantly moved to pacify them. Haha, Tilda, relax, you all, in fact, I don't want to wear it too, as wearing it like this makes me feel like I lost. It makes me feel like we're running away like rats, and as a Voss, we are anything but rats, sighed Damien, a sarcastic laugh escaping his lips. To be honest, he really didn't like this feeling of hiding and scurrying. Unfortunately, they had no choice. Right now we have 3 goals, he paused. First, we need to go back to Gravestone and meet Barnaby and Cypher. If those 2 haven't stolen my money by now and run away, they should have at least built up something reasonable. I plan to use them to establish a power left, as only with enough strength can we no longer be hidden. As he spoke, Damien's eyes began to shine brighter. Leaving the elf forest, it was time for his wings to truly soar, as over the past 6 months of training, every night he had worked and reworked all his plans. Now it was time to enact them. My plans are simple. I plan to dominate the entertainment industry of this world, create some never-before-seen products, and use that to accumulate fame and connections. Plant spies in various forces, and gain fame under a new identity, one so famous that my very name can open closed doors. However, again, to do this, we need Barnaby and Cypher. And this is only the first goal I have. Hearing this, Isabel, Lyra, and Leona were silent. Although they knew that the young man in front of them had ambitions, they never knew they were this large. From Damien's words alone, when he said famous, he didn't mean just empire-level famous. He meant continental. A feat perhaps only Thuron, the world's strongest man in the empire, could claim to achieve. In other words, Damien was planning to build a force comparable to, if not surpassing, the Voss family. Thinking of this, they were silent. Hey, young master, while I'm in support of anything you do, what do you mean by never-seen-before products? If they are never seen before, then how can you create them? Isabel asked, afraid she would dampen her young master's mood. Her voice was particularly low. As for Lyra and Leona, although they did not say anything, the doubt in their eyes was evident. They did not think the current Damien, despite how strong and mysterious he was, could achieve what he was saying. Hey Tilda, what do you all know? If I told you all the things that existed in the Blue Star, I'm sure you'd die of shock. As long as I can get a few dwarf artisans and recruit some mages, then reproducing some products from my past life should be easily achievable. Muttering inwardly, Damien did not tell them this, as despite being bound to the contract gem, things about the Blue Star were something he would never mention outwardly. After all, who knew which god or powerhouse could be silently watching them right now? Remembering how Alfred had followed them in the shadows before this, he couldn't help but feel a chill down his spine. Don't worry, that's just believe in me, I'll take care of everything. As for the other plan, that has to do with you, Leona, he said, looking at the confused lion girl with a question mark hovering over her head. Damien smiled slightly. Next, I have something for you and Alfred to be exact. Bringing out 2 contract gems, he began to explain. I'm sure you're wondering how Isabel awakened as a demon girl and can remain sane, why Lyra's skin turned gray overnight. Why can I use so many abilities at ease? Like a devil whispering temptations to a believer, Damien continued to speak. It was none other than because of this. Eating this, at the cost of being bound and loyal to me, you can awaken an innate ability for yourself, although I, the owner, will also awaken that ability. Yes, before they reached Gravestone, Damien had decided to power up as much as possible. After all, who knew what kinds of traps the Empire might have set for them? Plus, if Garrick was truly as evil as the Queen said, then he was sure to make a move if they returned the same. To avoid this, He stretched out 2 contract gems in his hand, one for Leona and one for Alfred. As for why he didn't speak to Alfred directly, he was sure that as a 7th-order powerhouse, Alfred could hear everything clearly. And sure enough, in front of them, a shadow arm suddenly appeared from thin air, grasping for a gem. "Well then, thank you for the meal, young master," said Alfred, his voice sounding throughout the carriage interiors. As for Leona, seeing the gem, she didn't immediately wait for it. Instead, unlike her regular character, she hesitated. "Young lord, it's not that Leona can't wait for it, but I have a question. Why is Sister Lyra's skin a different color, and why is Sister Isabel's normal? Also, what ability did Leona awaken? And if you can have all those abilities, doesn't that mean as long as you give millions of people gems, you can become invincible?" Asking these questions, Leona looked confused. If that was the case, then why didn't they start looking for people to feed the gems and make the young lord invincible? In her mind, that was a much better plan. Damien, hearing this, couldn't help but have a wry smile on his face. It's not that he didn't want to do that, but his ability had certain restrictions after the system changed it. Also, what ability did Leona awaken? And if you can have all those abilities, doesn't that mean as long as you give millions of people gems, you can become invincible? Hearing this question, a wry smile appeared on his face. Back then, when he had just edited the ability, perhaps because he used only 100 DP, the ability had a few side effects and limitations. Limitations that he only came to know now, after giving Isabel the first time. Thinking of this, amidst the eager eyes of the girls, he slowly began to explain. "Lyra and Isabel, I'm sure both of you have experienced the pain that comes with awakening abilities, but do you know what actually happens during that process?" he asked. And sure enough, hearing this question, both of them remained silent as neither of them had thought about it before. They both felt that since they were awakening such a power, it should be normal to come with a price, such as pain. In fact, Lyra, who had seen the world the most out of the group, felt the price should be even greater, as nothing in this world is truly free. Seeing this, Damien began to explain. "In this world, all talents, unlike magic, are awakened from the soul, and while some are prominent at birth, some remain dormant till death." Waving his hands, he summoned Leona's fire and removed the gravity on a nearby pebble. Even Isabel's bloodline, to a large extent, is not per se in her blood, but marked in her soul. Because of this, that's why awakening is so painful, because I'm forcibly prying up those hidden talents from the bottom of your soul and bringing them to the surface. As they heard this, their eyes began to brighten, a hint of understanding flashing through their minds. "Oh, then if that's the case, I understand it. Leona, your question regarding why he doesn't just get millions of abilities." "He just said the answer, it's because of the soul," said Lyra. With a hint of shock in her eyes, Lyra could hardly believe what she was hearing. You know, as an elf, her studies of life magic had long surpassed most races, and the soul was something intrinsically tied to life. However, apart from those evil necromancers and gods, no one dared to say they achieve mastery of the soul, much less awaken abilities from it. What Damien claimed to achieve through his contract gem was simply unheard of. You see, Leona, if those abilities are being awakened in our soul, then I guess that through the connection from the contract gems, those abilities are then copied and grafted onto his soul. However, this also creates an issue. The capacity of the soul is limited. If you end up putting too much pressure on your body with unnecessary abilities, you'll end up killing yourself. In fact, even those necromancers don't dare study with their own soul, only the souls of others, as injuries on the soul are almost impossible to recover from. The more she thought about it, the more she was shocked. She couldn't believe the kid in front of her, was willing to dare tamper with his soul to become stronger. She even doubted whether she could do the same if she had the same ability. As for Isabel and Leona, hearing this, they looked at Damien with different eyes. Because of Leona's explanation, they again realized just what length their young master was willing to go to achieve his goal. For a time, everyone's attitude toward Damien rose a bit. Ugh, Tilda, what are these guys thinking? Who are they looking at me like I almost lost my life? It's indeed painful, but as a system product, I can be at least sure it won't kill me. It's not as dangerous as you guys make it out to be. Thinking inwardly, the corners of his mouth couldn't help but twitch. However, for the sake of maintaining his image, he didn't correct them. Rather, taking advantage of the mood, he burst into laughter. "Haha, indeed it's what you say, Lyra, but don't forget who I am. Just like what you said, I am pasting everything on my soul, but there's a limit. At least from my analysis, I can only graft 9 abilities, with Isabel's gravity and fire taking 2, yours taking 1. I have 6 more abilities remaining. Or at least until I can find a way to upgrade my soul capacity. Either that or not accept abilities after that. Only their loyalty," said Damien. Fortunately, 6 was still a lot, as even with Leona and Alfred taking 1 each, if he gave Barnaby and Cypher 1, he would still have space for 2 more. One of which he planned to get from the Dwarf Empire. As for the last, he wasn't sure yet. All right then, but what about Sister Lyra? What ability did she awaken? You've been talking all this while, but you didn't say what, asked Leona as she curiously sniffed Lyra despite her resistance. Although she was unsure what it was a smell that Leona hadn't felt before. A smell that felt like the mixture of 2 elements spliced together. Confused by what it was, her curiosity could hardly be held back. Luckily, it wasn't much of a secret, and considering she would soon be one of them after eating her own gem, Damien winked at Lyra. Instead of his explaining, why didn't the owner of the ability take the stand? Ugh, Tilda, firstly, Leona, stop sniffing me. If you don't, I won't tell you what ability I awakened, no matter how much you beg, complained Lyra. However, she continued to speak. In fact, my ability isn't as powerful as Isabel's head-on. However, I find that it complements my current skill set quite well. Perhaps because of my connection with the kid, but my ability is a derivative of the shadow and wind elements. An ability I'd like to call the Phantom Wind. The carriage rumbled down the ancient forest path, its wheels kicking up clouds of moss and dirt as it headed back toward the border of the human empire. Unlike the heavy, mournful atmosphere of their arrival 6 months ago, the mood inside was now electric. The air hummed with the gradual recovery of life energy. Phantom Wind. Leona tilted her head, her lion ears twitching as she looked at the new, strange aura surrounding Lyra. That sounds kind of weak. Wind is just wind, right? It blows things. How does that help you kill a knight in full plate? Lyra smirked. It was a cold, confident expression that looked strange on her usually stoic face. The faint gray tint of her skin seemed to deepen as she channeled her mana. You think so? Lyra asked, her voice soft but carrying a dangerous edge. Then watch. She didn't ask Alfred to stop the carriage. She simply leaned out the open window, the wind whipping her silver-blonde hair back. See that bird? She pointed to a mana hawk soaring high above the tree line, easily 500 meters away. It was a blur of motion, a speck against the blue sky. I see it, Leona squinted, her golden beast eyes adjusting. It's too fast. Even with a bow, you'd need to lead the shot by at least 3 seconds, and the wind up there is. Lyra didn't listen. She didn't calculate wind speed. She didn't check the angle. She simply raised her hand. A bow formed from the air, but it wasn't the bright, translucent green construct of her past. It was a hybrid. Swirling currents of emerald wind formed the limbs, vibrating with high-speed energy. but wrapped around the wind like a suffocating snake was a thick, oily smoke of pitch-black shadow. The shadow didn't reflect light. It devoured it, dimming the air around Lyra's hand. She pulled the string back. PH whip. There was no sound, no hum of power, no screech of wind. The shadow element swallowed the noise entirely. Leona watched the hawk. You missed. I didn't even see the arrow leave the string. Splat. High in the sky, 500 meters away, the hawk suddenly exploded. A scene that made Damien feel a chill run down his spine. It didn't just fall, it was obliterated. Feathers and blood misted into the air as if a cannonball had hit it from inside. I didn't miss, Lyra said, dissolving the bow into wisps of gray smoke. The arrow became the wind and the shadow hit its mass. It entered the target's slipstream unseen and detonated on impact. Phantom wind. Leona's jaw dropped. She looked from the empty sky back to Lyra. Invisible, silent, exploding arrows. That's cheating. How is anyone supposed to block that? You don't, Lyra corrected, leaning back in her seat and crossing her arms. That's the point, it's efficiency. And it's mine. Leona looked at Lyra, then at Damien. Her golden eyes were burning with a mixture of jealousy and hunger. Young lord, Leona shouted, slamming her hands on her knees, denting the floorboard. I want mine, give me the gem. I can't be the only one without a cool upgrade. It's not fair. Haha, Damien laughed, obviously expecting this reaction. I was wondering when you'd ask. He knocked on the partition behind him. Alfred, stop the carriage. We need a break. Time for both of you to power up. Really? A few minutes later, roadside clearing. The carriage came to a halt in a quiet clearing surrounded by towering redwoods. Damien stood before Leona and Alfred. He held two shimmering blue contract gems in his hand. They pulsed with a faint, rhythmic light, responding to his own mana. Leona, Alfred, Damien said, his voice turning serious. You know the risks. You saw what happened to Lyra and Isabel. This will hurt. It will tear your soul open and stitch it back together with my mana signature. Pain is just weakness leaving the body, Leona grinned, her fangs showing. She didn't hesitate. She snatched the gem from his hand. I'm ready. Give it to me. Thinking that she was about to get stronger, for a moment, she began to lose her cool. As am I, young master, Alfred said calmly, taking out his own gem with a gloved hand. He adjusted his glasses. To serve the Voss family better, a little discomfort is a small price. All right, Damien nodded. Eat. Gulp. They swallowed simultaneously. For a second, nothing happened. The forest was silent. Then Leona screamed. Arghch. She fell to her knees, clawing at the ground. Her muscles bulged, tearing the sleeves of her tunic. A terrifying, blood-red aura exploded from her body, but it wasn't just the beast aura she had learned in training. It was darker, heavier. It smelled of old blood and iron. Her eyes rolled back, turning entirely white. Her roar shook the trees, causing birds to scatter miles away. System alert. Target Leona awakening. Ability detected. Beast aura plus contract resonance. New ability, Berserk aura. Effect, strength and regeneration increase continuously during combat. Pain perception is nullified. Cost, sanity degrades the longer the ability is active. Berserk, Damien muttered, watching her thrash. A double-edged sword. She becomes an unstoppable and unkillable monster at the cost of her mind. He looked at Leona. She was panting, drool dripping from her mouth, her claws digging deep furrows into the earth. She looked ready to attack him. Leona, Damien shouted, using the contract bond to push his will directly into her mind. Control it. You are the beast, not the prey. Look at me. Leona's head snapped up. Her white eyes slowly returned to gold. She blinked, confused, looking at her trembling hands. I feel, she whispered, clenching her fist. The air popped under the pressure. I feel like I could punch a hole in the sky. You probably could, Damien said. But be careful. That power eats your mind. Use it too long and you might not come back. Understood, Leona grinned, a wild, predatory look returning to her eyes. I like it. Still holding back the pain, she struggled to maintain her cool. Meanwhile, Alfred was silent. He hadn't screamed. He hadn't fallen. He stood there, his eyes closed, sweating profusely. The shadows around him were twisting, warping like a mirage in the heat. Suddenly he opened his eyes. They were pitch black. He took a step forward. But he didn't walk. The space folded. One moment he was 10 feet away, the next he was standing directly behind Damien, adjusting Damien's collar. "Young master," Alfred said softly, "your collar was crooked." Damien jumped, spinning around. "Alfred, what was that?" "System alert. Target Alfred awakening." Ability detected. Shadow affinity plus spatial resonance. New ability, spatial manipulation. Effect, short-range teleportation, spatial distortion and dimension cutting. The ultimate assassin skill. Spatial manipulation, Damien breathed. You hit the jackpot, old man. That's a high-tier ability even for 8th orders. However, his distance seems a bit limited. Also, the stamina consumption doesn't look small. Muttering inwardly, Damien noticed the beads of sweat on Alfred's head. Obviously, that short jump took quite a lot from him. Alfred bowed deeply. "It seems I can now serve you from anywhere, young master. Distance is no longer an obstacle." Damien then looked at his team. Isabel, the demon of gluttony, fire, gravity. Lyra, the phantom sniper, wind, shadow. Leona, the berserker, infinite strength / region. Alfred, the void assassin, space, shadow. They were a nightmare, a perfectly balanced unit of destruction. "All right," Damien said, a thrill of excitement running through him. "Everyone is upgraded. Everyone is ready." He pointed down the road, toward the distant outline of the human border. "Get back in the carriage. We have a date in Gravestone. Barnaby and Cypher have been waiting long enough. It's time to collect our money and officially start the Black Thread." As for him, he decided to copy their abilities in the carriage, as the reason he stopped was that he was afraid they would awaken some terrible power and destroy the carriage. However, that pain. If Leona shouted that much and even Alfred struggled for a bit, then I'm about to suffer 10 times worse. Thinking of the pain he was about to endure, Damien silently cursed the system for not making it easier. Time soon passed, and with the awakening of their abilities, the next part of their journey was particularly eventful. No bandits, no monster attacks, no cultists for a while. Damien even had begun to imagine if such peaceful times could last forever. Now 10 days later, the carriage rumbled to a halt on the outskirts of Gravestone. Unlike their arrival 6 months ago, when the town was bustling with merchants, adventurers, and the chaotic noise of a border trade hub, the silence now was deafening. "Something is wrong," Lyra whispered, her hand instinctively reaching for the empty air where her phantom bow would materialize. Damien peered through the carriage curtains. The sun was setting, painting the sky in a bruised purple hue. Usually this was the time when the taverns opened and the nightlife began, but the streets were empty, shops were boarded up. The only movement came from patrols of heavily armored guards who weren't wearing the local militia crest, but the Royal Army insignia. "Martial law," Damien noted, his eyes narrowing. "The Empire has tightened its grip." "Young master, look." Isabel pointed to a wooden notice board near the town gate. It was plastered with layers of paper, but one poster dominated the rest. It featured a rough sketch of a silver-haired man with a jagged scar, Damien Voss. Wanted, THERON-VOSS, and all VOSS kin. Crime, treason, demon worship, genocide. Reward, 10 million gold, dead or alive. Damien stared at the poster. Seeing it with his own eyes hit harder than hearing it from Aeliner. Genocide. Those bastards, I'm sure they pushed my dad to the edge before he made this decision. Muttering inwardly, both from the original novel and interacting with him in real life, Damien knew that his father wasn't one to do something like this without absolutely needing to. These Empire bastards probably did something unforgivable. We can't enter through the main gate, Damien said, pulling his hood low to hide his silver hair. They are checking IDs. If they see me and sense Voss mana, the alarm will go off instantly. We'll go to the fortress, Leona grunted, adjusting her new gauntlets. That's where Barnaby and Cypher should be. Agreed, Alfred, take the side road. Let's see what they've built. The former slaver fortress. The carriage navigated the back roads, avoiding patrols until the looming silhouette of the slaver fortress appeared against the night sky. It looked different. The broken gate Damien had ordered Isabel to smash 6 months ago was repaired, reinforced with black iron and strange, glowing runes. The walls were higher. But what surprised Damien most were the guards. Standing at the entrance were not humans, but demi-humans. A wolfkin with a scar across his snout and a towering bearkin holding a massive club. Halt, the wolfkin barked as the carriage approached. This is private property of the Golden Coin Merchant Guild. Trespassing is not allowed. Golden Coin, Damien raised an eyebrow. Barnaby gave it a nice name, great. Thinking of this, he stepped out of the carriage still wearing the elven cloak given by the Queen, his face hidden in shadow. I'm looking for the manager, Damien said calmly. Tell his savior is here. The manager sees no one, the bearkin growled. Stepping forward to block the path. Leave or we break your legs. Leona, seeing a fellow beastkin threaten her lord, let out a low growl. Her berserk aura flared, a red mist leaking from her armor. You want to break legs? Leona stepped down, the ground cracking under her boot. Try it, teddy bear. The guards flinched. They sensed the difference in power instantly. This wasn't a normal beastkin, this was a predator. Wait, stop, you idiots. A panicked shout came from the top of the wall. The massive iron gate creaked open, and a chubby figure in a silk robe came running out, panting heavily, followed by a shadow that seemed to glide over the ground. Barnaby and Cypher. Boss, you're back, Barnaby yelled, waving his hands frantically at the guards. Stand down, are you blind? That's the owner. The guards froze, looking from the terrifying Leona to the calm silver-haired boy. Cypher appeared next to Damien in a blur of motion, bowing deeply. Young master, we knew you would come back soon, however, we didn't expect you so soon. We made good time, Damien smiled. It seems you've been busy, demi-human guards, a merchant guild, not bad. We have much to report, Cypher said, his voice low. Please come inside, it isn't safe out here. The Inquisitors are sniffing around every shadow. Inside the fortress command room. The interior of the fortress had been transformed. The cages were gone, replaced by warehouses stacked with crates. The torture chambers were now offices. It looked less like a prison and more like a headquarters. Damien sat at the head of the table. Isabel, Lyra, and Leona stood behind him. Alfred stood by the door, invisible to the untrained eye. Barnaby was sweating, wiping his forehead with a silk handkerchief. Boss, it's been chaos, Barnaby started, his voice trembling slightly. Ever since the incident, at the capital the whole empire has gone mad. The Voss family incident, Damien said, his finger tapping the table. Yes, Cypher took over. The official story is that Thuron Voss summoned a demon god to assassinate the emperor. The capital was destroyed. The Voss manor was obliterated by the royal army and the guild association. Lies, Damien said calmly, but effective lies. The second prince has declared martial law, Cypher continued. He is purging anyone connected to the Voss family, nobles, merchants, even distant relatives. They are being rounded up and executed publicly in the squares. Isabel gasped, her hand covering her mouth. Executed. It's a witch hunt, Lyra muttered, her face grim. Boss, Barnaby leaned forward. The economy is crashing. People are terrified, but that's good for us. Desperate people buy information. They buy protection. The black thread, or the golden coin as we call it publicly, has grown massive. We have eyes all over the city. Adding to the freed slaves from before, we have a lot of hands on deck. Good, Damien nodded. We will need those hands. He looked at his two subordinates. They looked terrified, not just of the Empire, but of the situation. Barnaby, Cypher, Damien said softly. They looked up. You're wondering why I'm not surprised. You're wondering why I'm so calm despite the Empire being in so much chaos. He stood up. He reached up and pulled his hood down, revealing his silver hair and piercing blue eyes. His shadow mana flaring right behind. The room went silent. Barnaby's jaw dropped. Cypher's eyes widened. About that, Damien smirked, the golden dragon aura flaring slightly, making him look like a king reclaiming his throne. I'm actually a Voss. In fact, I'm the current heir to be exact. He leaned over the table, his smile widening into something predatory. So, gentlemen, what are you going to do? For these two who he had not given the contract gem to, their next reaction would decide if they were worthy to join him or be eliminated on the spot. Prev. Next. So, gentlemen, what are you going to do? The question hung in the air, heavy and suffocating, reinforced by the twin pressures of shadow mana and golden aura. Barnaby and Cypher stared at the silver-haired boy sitting at the head of the table. The revelation that their mysterious boss was actually the heir to the treasonous, world-shaking Voss family hit them like a physical blow. Cypher the spy was the first to recover. A flicker of understanding passed through his sharp eyes. The king of darkness, Thuron Voss. The empress of deceit, Elizabeth. No wonder, Cypher muttered, looking at Damien's glowing blue eyes. No wonder a child has such monstrous power. You aren't a prodigy, you're a legacy. A legacy with a 10 million gold bounty, Barnaby squeaked, wiping sweat from his forehead with a silk handkerchief. Boss, if the Empire finds out we're sheltering a Voss, they won't just hang us, they'll peel us. High risk, Damien said calmly, tapping the table. High reward. He reached into his void gem. You two have served me well on faith alone. You built this guild. You gathered intelligence. You proved your competence. He placed two shimmering blue contract gems on the table. They pulsed with a rhythmic light, echoing Damien's heartbeat. But faith isn't enough for where we are going. The path ahead involves fighting empires, gods, and demons. I cannot afford betrayal. Damien pushed the gems forward. Bind your souls to mine. In exchange, I will give you power, wealth, and a seat at the table of the new world. Refuse, and you walk out that door with nothing. Or die, Damien added silently, his shadow mana tightening around the room. He liked them, but he wasn't naive. He couldn't leave loose ends. Barnaby looked at the gem. He looked at Leona standing behind Damien, radiating the terrifying pressure of her berserk aura. He looked at the mountains of gold crates in his warehouse. Greed warred with fear. Greed won. To hell with it, Barnaby grabbed the gem. I was a slave 6 months ago. Now I own a castle. I'm all in, boss. He swallowed it. Cypher didn't hesitate. I have lived in the shadows my whole life. Serving the king of shadows seems fitting. He swallowed his gem. Thump thump. The moment the gems dissolved in their stomachs, the reaction was instantaneous. Gah, Barnaby doubled over, clutching his stomach, his face turning a sickly shade of pale. It burns. Cypher fell to one knee, his teeth gritted so hard his jaw popped. My soul, it feels like it's being rewritten. Veins bulged on their foreheads as the contract took hold, forcibly expanding their potential and binding their lifelines to Damien. At the same time, Damien felt the backlash. Arg! He gritted his teeth, his hands gripping the edge of the table until the wood cracked. It felt like two hot iron hooks were being driven into his mind, dragging new information into his soul. But then, just as the pain peaked, it vanished. Whoosh! A cool, refreshing sensation washed over his soul, soothing the tears instantly. System alert. Soul grafting in progress. Slots consumed, 2 remaining slots 2. Acquired ability, Golden Abacus Barnaby, calculating. Acquired ability, Shadow Weave Cipher, calculating. Integration successful. Damien blinked, surprised. He looked at the timer in his mind. That was fast, too fast. With Isabel and Leona, the integration took hours of agony. This minute seconds, and the pain faded almost instantly. He clenched his fist, feeling the new vitality coursing through his veins. The celestial life physique, Damien realized, his eyes widening. It doesn't just heal my body, it heals my soul. It's accelerating the grafting process and dampening the backlash. With this physique, I don't almost pass out like before. He then looked at his subordinates. Barnaby and Cipher were panting heavily, soaked in sweat, but the pain had passed for them too. They looked up, their eyes clearer, sharper. "Boss?" Barnaby asked, his voice trembling but filled with awe. I can see numbers everywhere, profit margins, risks. It's like the world is a ledger." "And Cipher whispered, looking at his hands which seemed to flicker in the dim light. "I am no longer just hiding in the dark. I am part of it." "Good," Damien straightened up, his eyes flashing with a mix of gold and black. "Those are your gifts. Use them well." "Now," Damien said, his voice steady, "let's talk business." He pulled a stack of blueprints from his void gem and slammed them onto the table. These weren't magical tomes. They were sketches Damien had drawn from his memories of Blue Star. "The Golden Coin Guild is a good start," Damien said. "But selling grain and ore is peasant work. If we want to rule the economy, we need to sell culture." He pointed to the first sketch. It depicted a sleek, form-fitting dress with a slit up the thigh, made of silk and lace. Next to it were designs for modern-style lingerie. "Fashion," Damien declared. "The nobles of the empire are bored. They wear heavy, stifling velvet. We are going to sell them elegance. We are going to sell them desire." Barnaby picked up the sketch, his eyes widening as his new golden abacus ability instantly calculated the potential revenue. This is scandalous. The church will hate it, but the profit margins, astronomical." "The wives of the dukes will love it," Damien smirked. "And what the wives love, the dukes pay for." He pointed to the second sketch. It was a design for a memory crystal projector, basically, a movie theater. "Entertainment," Damien continued. "We aren't just selling clothes. We are going to sell stories, plays that don't need actors, music that plays itself. We are going to make the Black Thread brand the most desired symbol on the continent." He looked at Barnaby. "I am going to the Dwarven Kingdom to secure the manufacturing technology. Your job is to create the demand. By the time I get back, I want every noblewoman in the Dragon Empire dying to wear our label." I can do it, boss," Barnaby stammered, his fear replaced by greed. "We'll be richer than the Emperor." "That's the goal," Damien nodded. WOP, WOP, WOP. Suddenly, a harsh, magical siren began to blare throughout the fortress. The red emergency lights flickered on. "Alarm!" Leona roared, her gauntlets instantly materializing on her hands. "Enemy attack!" Cipher's face went pale. He touched the shadow on the floor, his eyes losing focus as he used his new shadow weave connection to scan the perimeter. "It's not a patrol," Cypher whispered, his voice tight with fear. "It's him." "Who?" Damien asked, standing up. "Baylor," Cypher hissed. "The slaver king, he's back, and he brought an army." Damien walked to the window. Outside, the night sky was lit up by hundreds of torches. A massive army of mercenaries and cultists had surrounded the fortress. And standing at the front, radiating a terrifying fifth-order aura that shook the ground, was a man clad in dragonbone armor, holding a massive war hammer. "Assholes," Baylor's voice boomed, amplified by magic. "I know you're in there, you silver-haired rat. You stole my fortress. You killed my men. Come out and I'll make your death quick." Damien looked at the army, then he looked at his team. He smiled. Barnaby packed the blueprints. Cypher burned the ledgers. "We're leaving," Isabel asked, her hands igniting with fire. "We aren't going to fight." "We can win," Damien said coldly. "But if we fight here, my new merchant guild gets destroyed in the crossfire. I didn't spend months planning this just to burn my own base down." He threw his hood back up. "We're going to lead them away. We run south, toward the dwarves. Let's see if the slaver king can catch us. Come out and die." The roar from outside wasn't just loud, it was heavy. The air in the command room grew thick and suffocating, vibrating with a specific, malicious frequency. It felt like invisible chains were wrapping around everyone's throats, weighing down their souls. Barnaby fell to his knees, clutching his chest. "Boss, I can't breathe." Cypher was trembling, his shadow flickering erratically. Damien narrowed his eyes, his dual-core spinning to push back the pressure. Intent, Damien realized. That's fifth-order intent. He walked to the window and looked down. Baylor, the slaver king, stood at the front of his army. He wasn't just a brute in armor. The mana radiating from him formed the image of a massive, spectral shackle crushing the fortress. And behind him, 1, 2, 10, 40. 40, Damien counted, a cold smile playing on his lips. He brought 44th Order elites, and he is a peak 5th Order warlord. He looked back at Lyra. "You were right, Lyra. Back in Silverwood, you warned me about a 5th Order leader. I thought Vargas was him. I was wrong." "Vargas was the babysitter," Lyra said, her face pale as she gripped her bow. This is the master." "If we fight here," Leona growled, her berserk aura flaring up to resist the pressure, "we can win, but the castle falls." "And my money burns," Damien finished. He turned to his subordinates. A plan formed instantly in his mind. "Barnaby, Cypher, listen to me." Damien grabbed Barnaby by the collar of his silk robe and hauled him up. "You two are the foundation of my empire. You have the blueprints. You have the gold. If you die, I lose my future." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, jagged black stone, a communication gem linked to his own. "Take this. I want you to take the gold and the blueprints into the deep tunnels. Abandon the fortress. Let them have the empty shell. Go underground and spread the Golden Coin Guild to the other cities. Hide in the shadows until I call for you." But boss," Barnaby stammered, "who will protect us if Baylor finds us?" "He won't look for you," Damien said, "because I'm going to make him look at me." He turned to the corner of the room. "Alfred." The shadow rippled. The butler appeared, bowing calmly despite the crushing pressure outside. "Young master." "I have a new order for you," Damien said, his voice absolute. "You are not coming with me to the Dwarf Kingdom." "Young master," Alfred frowned, a rare sign of disagreement. "My duty is to protect." "Your duty is to protect the Voss family legacy," Damien cut him off. "And right now, this organization is that legacy. If Cypher and Barnaby die, the Black Thread dies." Damien pointed at the two terrified spies. "Stay with them, protect them. Build the network from the shadows. But listen closely, Alfred, do not expose yourself." Damien's eyes burned with intensity. If a Seventh Order Dark Mage appears here, the Empire will know I survived. The Second Prince will send an army. You only reveal your power if it is absolutely necessary to save their lives. Otherwise, be a ghost." Alfred hesitated, looking at Damien, then at the trembling merchants. He understood. The boy wasn't playing adventurer anymore. He was playing king. "As you wish," Alfred bowed deeply. "I will guard the shadows until you return." "Good." Damien turned to his combat team. "Isabel, Lyra, Leona, we are the bait." He pulled his hood up. "Leona, break the back wall. We're leaving." "Ali?" Outside the fortress, Baylor swung his massive war hammer. "Come out, rats." Boom! He hit the air, but the shockwave slammed into the fortress gate like a battering ram. The iron buckled. The intent of slavery washed over the guards, forcing them to their knees, mentally broken before they were even hit. "He's going to level the place," a lieutenant shouted. "Sir, should we storm it?" "No," Baylor sneered. "I want to see him beg." Suddenly, a massive explosion rocked the rear of the fortress. Crash! A section of the stone wall exploded outward. Through the dust and debris, a black carriage drawn by spirit stags burst out, hitting the ground with a bone-shaking thud. Sitting on the roof of the carriage was a silver-haired boy, flanked by a demon maid and an elf ranger. "Hey, ugly!" Damien stood on the roof, his voice amplified by mana. He held up a bag of gold coins, loot from the fortress, and shook it. "Looking for this?" Baylor's eyes bulged. "Voss. Catch me if you can, you slaver trash." Damien threw the bag, not at Baylor, but into the middle of the mercenary army. Gold coins rained down like hail. "Money, it's gold." The mercenaries instinctively scrambled, breaking formation. "Idiots, ignore the gold, kill him," Baylor roared, his aura exploding. "Now, Leona," Damien shouted, jumping back into the carriage. "Hiya," Leona whipped the stags. The carriage surged forward, accelerating with magical speed, heading straight for the southern pass. "After them," Baylor screamed, smashing a greedy mercenary who was picking up a coin. "Leave the fortress. The boy is the target. I want his head." The entire army turned. 44th Order elites and the 5th Order king mounted their war beasts and charged after the carriage. Ali. Inside the fortress ruins. In the silence left behind, 3 figures stood in the shadows of the command room. Barnaby clutched the blueprints to his chest, his heart racing. He drew them away, all of them. "He is a true lord," Cypher whispered, his eyes gleaming with a new fanaticism. "He used himself as the lure to save the Foundation." Alfred adjusted his glasses, his eyes cold as he watched the dust settle. "We have work to do," the butler said, his voice dropping to a chilling whisper. "The young master has bought us time. Let us not waste it." He placed a hand on their shoulders. Spatial shift. The 3 of them vanished into the dark, leaving an empty fortress for the Empire to find. Faster, they're gaining. The carriage violently shook as it tore down the dirt road, the 4 spirit stags foaming at the mouth as they galloped at magical speeds. Their hooves struck the ground with the force of hammers, kicking up clouds of dust that choked the night air. But the cloud rising behind them was bigger. Illuminated by the harsh orange glow of torches, a stampede of 40 elite riders was closing the distance, and at the front of that avalanche of steel and malice was a monster. Baylor, the slaver king, wasn't riding a horse. He was mounted atop a steel-scaled rhino, a massive 4th Order beast with armor plates thick enough to shrug off siege weaponry. The ground trembled with every step it took. But the beast wasn't the scary part. It was the pressure. Clank, clank. Damien could hear it in his mind, the sound of phantom chains rattling. It wasn't a physical sound. It was a psychic weight pressing down on his soul. "My body," Isabel gasped, clutching the window frame, her knuckles turning white. It feels heavy, like I'm wearing iron cuffs. I can't circulate my mana. Leona, usually fearless, was trembling. Her berserk aura flickered and died, suppressed by a higher power. I can't move my arms. It feels like a master is ordering me to kneel. Damien gritted his teeth. His vision swam. Flashback. The sacred grove, 6 months ago. At the fourth order, your mana takes on a nature, Eleanor had said, crushing a leaf in her hand. It becomes intent. But what about the fifth order? Damien had asked. At the fifth order, Eleanor's eyes had turned serious. The intent becomes tangible. It projects outward. If a swordsman's intent is sharpness, looking at him will cut your eyes. If a king's intent is rule, standing before him will force you to bow. Flashback end. Intent, Damien wheezed, blood leaking from his nose. That's fifth order intent, and his intent is submission. He looked back. Baylor was only 200 meters away. The slaver king didn't look like a warrior, he looked like a jailer. The brown aura radiating from him formed the faint, spectral image of a massive collar hanging over the carriage. "You can run, little rat," Baylor roared, his voice booming like a gavel striking a podium. "But every slave returns to the master eventually. Kneel." Boom! The pressure doubled, the spirit stag stumbled, the carriage slowed. "Damn it," Damien shouted internally. "We're going to get caught, the team is paralyzed." He closed his eyes. He didn't reach for his mana. He reached for that strange, ethereal power sitting between his two cores. His will. "I don't kneel, I am the greedy king. I own, I am not owned." "Wake you, P." Damien roared. It wasn't a physical shout. It was a burst of willpower. Crack! A golden ripple exploded from his body, clashing against Baylor's brown suppression. For a second, the phantom chains shattered. "Gah!" Damien coughed violently, blood dripping from the corner of his eyes. The strain of using his will to block a fifth order's intent was tearing his mind apart. But it worked. Gasps. Isabel and Leona sucked in air. The weight lifting was just enough for them to move. "Don't stop," Damien yelled, wiping the blood from his face. "Lyra, you're the only one with the range. Slow them down." Lyra, whose face was pale but focused, nodded. She leaned out the window. Her gray skin blended with the shadows. "On it." She raised her hand. A phantom bow formed, wind and shadow twisted together. At this distance, 200 meters, neither Damien nor Isabel could effectively attack. Their magic would dissipate before hitting. Even Leona was useless unless they got into melee range, which would be suicide against a fifth order. Only Lyra, the sniper, had the reach. PH whip. She fired. Behind Baylor, one of the fourth order elites suddenly jerked backwards. His aura shield didn't even flicker. A hole appeared in his throat and he tumbled off his mount, dead before he hit the ground. "Sniper!" Baylor screamed, "shields up." The mercenaries raised their shields, creating a wall of light. PH whip, PH whip. 2 more riders fell. The phantom arrows bypassed the shields entirely, striking through the gaps in their armor. "They can't block what they can't see," Lyra whispered, her hands moving in a blur. "And they can't sense what has no killing intent until it hits." She was the perfect counter to their formation. "Annoying fly," Baylor roared, his eyes bulging with rage. "You think tricks will save you?" He stood up in his stirrups. He swung his massive war hammer. He wasn't a mage. He didn't cast a spell. He just used pure, overwhelming aura strength. Slave King's hammer, earth shock. He slammed the hammer into the empty air. Boom! The air compressed. A visible shockwave of brown aura blasted forward like a cannonball, tearing up the road as it raced toward the carriage. "It's too fast," Lyra shouted, ducking back inside. "Leona, deflect it," Damien ordered. I can't stop it," Leona yelled, her berserk aura flaring as she climbed to the roof. It's too heavy. She didn't try to block it head-on. She slammed her gauntlets into the side of the shockwave, trying to parry the force. Crash! The impact nearly flipped the carriage. Leona screamed as the bones in her arm cracked, but she managed to knock the blast slightly off course. It clipped the rear wheel, shattering the wood, but the carriage kept moving on 3 wheels, skidding sparks. "We can't take another hit like that," Leona yelled, clutching her arm. "We don't have to," Damien said, pointing ahead. The looming silhouette of the Red Rock Canyon appeared. The road narrowed into a deadly funnel between 2 cliffs. "Isabel," Damien gasped, his head pounding from the strain. "Get ready, the moment we pass the entrance. Bring the roof down." "But Baylor is too strong," Isabel cried. "Rocks won't kill him." "I don't want to kill him," Damien wiped blood from his eye. "I want to bury him. Even a 5th Order needs time to dig." The carriage shot into the canyon. Baylor followed, laughing as he sensed his prey entering the trap. "Now!" Isabel leaned out. Her horns burst forth. "Gravity, collapse." She reversed the gravity on the cliff face. "Rumble." As Baylor rode into the pass, the mountain above him simply let go. Thousands of tons of rock crashed down, sealing the path and burying the slaver king in a tomb of red stone. The carriage sped away into the darkness of the canyon, leaving the roar of the angry warlord muffled behind a wall of rubble. "We're alive," Damien whispered, slumping back in his seat. "For now," Lyra said grimly, looking at the map. "But the dwarf kingdom is still weeks away, and he's going to be very angry when he digs himself out." Silence was deafening, broken only by the rhythmic clatter of the remaining 3 wheels and the strained breathing of the spirit stags. Damien didn't wait. The moment the carriage leveled out, he was scrambling. "Leona, how bad is the arm?" he demanded, already applying a simple earth mana compressed to the side of her helmet where the visor was jammed shut. Leona pushed the carriage roof open and dropped back inside, wincing. She was covered in dust and grit. "Clean break, maybe a hairline fracture in the ulna. I'll heal. It's the stags, they're pushing past their limit." She fought to suppress the flare of her berserk aura, knowing the raw power consumption would collapse her faster than Baylor could catch them. The spirit stags were breathing in harsh, ragged gasps, their speed maintained only by the sheer momentum and Lyra's constant, faint stream of phantom wind urging them forward. "Lyra, keep them running. We can't stop yet," Damien said, his voice raw. He ran his tongue across his lips and tasted the metallic tang of his own blood which was crusting beneath his nose. The backlash of countering Baylor's intent was a migraine that felt like a chisel was being driven into his skull. Isabel looked pale but focused. "The collapse will hold him for hours. That was thousands of tons of rock. Even a 5th Order shouldn't." Crumble, crumble. The sound was not a muffled rumble. It was a clear, sharp sound traveling through the rock walls of the canyon. It sounded like a dog digging a hole. Damien's heart dropped. He looked at Lyra, whose eyes were wide with disbelief as she stared at the back wall of the canyon on the map. "No way," Lyra whispered. "He's using his aura like a geothermal drill. He's vaporizing the rock." A roar of pure fury. Boom! The sound that followed was the detonation of a mountain. A colossal wave of brown, dust-filled air shot through the canyon like a cannon blast, knocking the carriage sideways and lifting the spirit stags clean off the ground. "Hold on," Damien screamed, slamming his back against the seat, clutching Leona's good arm to anchor her. The blast passed, and the carriage slammed back onto the ground, bouncing violently. And then the light. Up ahead, far down the winding path they had just traversed, a harsh, malevolent orange glare appeared. It wasn't the sun. It was the torches of the slaver king. But Baylor wasn't just riding, he was flying. The steel-scaled rhino's massive body was encased in a shell of brilliant brown intentora. The 4th Order beast had been transformed into a living, armored projectile, tearing through the canyon floor at a speed that defied its size. It was a terrifying, irresistible sight. He's found a way to use his intent to accelerate the rhino. It's too heavy for the canyon walls to hold him back. Isabel shrieked, pressing her hands against her ears to block the sound of Baylor's renewed, wrathful roar. Lyra, Damien yelled, forcing his will to steady. Faster they're gaining. Lyra's control over the spirit stags was superhuman, but even she couldn't squeeze more speed out of the magical creatures. They were already giving their very essence just to maintain their current, desperate pace. I'm at their limit, Damien. We'll lose them to exhaustion if I push them harder. Damien looked at the map. They were cornered. He glanced at the side window. They were nearing the canyon exit where the road opened up to the plains. The carriage shot out of the canyon mouth, skidding hard onto the open ground. Now, Lyra, push the stags past their limit now, Damien ordered. Lyra screamed in effort, pouring a torrent of phantom wind into the exhausted beasts. They surged forward for a final, glorious burst of speed. But Baylor was already out. Boom! The Slaver King and his rhino shot out of the canyon like a cannonball, covering the ground. Damien's team needed minutes to cross in mere seconds. Baylor didn't even slow down to attack. He simply projected his raw, overwhelming intent. The psychic weight slammed into the carriage. Clank, clank. The spirit stags, already running on borrowed time, collapsed instantly, their legs folding beneath them as their fear was amplified 1,000 times. They hit the dirt, sliding the damaged carriage to a dead stop. No, Isabel shrieked as the carriage skidded to a complete halt, throwing them forward. Baylor didn't use his warhammer. He simply pointed a finger at the immobile carriage, his face twisted in a snarl of pure, humiliated rage. You think rocks stop a king? You belong to me. The psychic weight doubled. Leona gasped, slamming her hand against her injured arm. He's too fast, we're pinned. Damien gritted his teeth, feeling the pressure crushing his dual core. He had spent every ounce of his will to survive the pursuit, and now he was completely empty. He looked at the collapsed spirit stags, then at the Slaver King closing the distance, less than 50 meters now. Running is suicide, fighting is oblivion. Damn it, Damien cursed under his breath. He reached into his shirt, pulling out the silver necklace his mother had given him, the Voss shadow medallion. We run out of tricks, Damien said, his voice cold with desperation. He forced himself to stand. Lyra, Leona, Isabel, get close, now. Baylor laughed, the sound booming through the plains. Too late, little rats, your escape ends. Lyra, Isabel, and Leona threw themselves at Damien, grabbing his armor, his cloak, and his arms. Damien slammed the black gem at the center of the medallion with the hilt of his dagger. Teleport. VWOM. The black carriage, the spirit stags, and the four figures vanished instantly, dissolving into a shadow that was no longer there. Baylor stopped dead where they had been moments before. He looked at the empty, smoking road. He searched the air, his eyes glowing furiously with intent. His chest heaved. He realized they had escaped, a spatial artifact. He raised his massive warhammer, slamming it against the ground where the carriage had been with a scream of absolute, blinding fury. Boom, crack. Rat, I will have your head. The Slaver King's roar, echoing across the plains, was a promise of terrifying vengeance. Prev. Next, a searing, bone-dry heat slammed into Damien, replacing the cool, dust-choked air of the canyon. He hit the ground hard, rolling in loose, scorching sand. The shock of the sudden transition made his vision swim. My head, Isabel groaned, coughing up sand as she untangled herself from Lyra. Where did we land? It's burning. They had been teleported. The Voss shadow medallion, meant to grant a quick escape, had delivered them to a location far more hostile than the canyon. Damien pushed himself up, spitting out grit. The scene was utterly foreign. They were in a vast, empty desert, the sands of Drolgar, known for being the treacherous outer rim of the dwarven territories. The sun beat down with brutal intensity on dunes that stretched to a hazy horizon. "It's a desert," Damien rasped, his dual core already screaming under the temperature fluctuation. "The medallion sends us to a random shadow 3 kilometers away. It chose the wrong shadow." "At least Baylor isn't here," Leona grunted, her lion ears flicking nervously. She knelt, inspecting the ground, her gaze fixed on the sand. "But we have bigger problems." Rumble, rumble. The sand beneath them began to pulse and vibrate. Damien looked around. Huge, defined ripples were surging through the dunes toward them, moving with frightening speed, like massive subterranean waves. "What is that?" Lyra grabbed her bow, her gray skin blending poorly against the stark yellow sand. "Sand worms," Damien said, recognizing the attack pattern immediately. "Desert scourges, Tier 3 magic beasts. They hunt by vibration." The nearest ripple erupted. A colossal, segmented head burst from the sand, easily 20 feet high. Its maw was a terrifying circular saw blade of bone and teeth, dripping corrosive saliva. Its yellow skin was tough, its eyes small and black. "Roar!" The noise was a grating hiss that echoed across the dunes. The worm was quickly followed by 2 others, surrounding the party. "Tier 3 is too easy for us now, young lord," Leona roared, her eyes shining with renewed confidence. She rushed forward, activating her berserk aura to meet the nearest threat. "I'll take the lead." "Wait," Damien commanded, extending his hand. "We aren't alone, look." He pointed to a cluster of strange, metallic objects further up the dune. Blink, blink. Small flashes of light flickered near the top of a small rise about 500 meters away. A desperate battle was taking place. The dwarven convoy. A small group of figures, short, stocky, and clad in thick, blackened iron armor, were pinned behind a hastily erected shield wall. They were dwarves. Their small, compact forms were surrounded by 6 more enormous sandworms, which were hammering the dwarven shields with their massive heads. Sparks flew from the iron plating. "They're dwarves," Lyra confirmed, her vision enhanced by mana. "A transport convoy, and they're losing ground." Damien's eyes narrowed. This wasn't just a rescue, this was an opportunity. "I need access to the Dwarven King, Durin, to get manufacturing tech for my Black Thread Empire. The easiest way into a closed, suspicious society like the dwarves is through an act of overwhelming, undeniable merit." "We're going in," Damien stated, drawing his sword. Leona instantly checked her injured arm. "My arm is cracked, young lord, and they outnumber us 9 worms in total." "A simple Tier 3 ambush shouldn't be enough to pin down a heavily armored dwarven convoy," Damien observed. "They must be exhausted or low on mana. This is perfect." He looked at Isabel and Lyra. "You two eliminate the ones attacking the dwarves. Focus on separating the heads from the bodies. Leona, you take the 3 immediately surrounding us." He activated his dual core, a faint layer of black and golden energy swirling around his body. The pain of the exertion was minimal now, thanks to the celestial life physique. "Let's show the dwarves the power of the black thread." The rescue. Leona didn't need to be told twice. She grinned, a wild, predatory expression. She rushed the nearest worm, dodging its crushing descent with pure agility. The massive worm slammed its head into the sand where she had been. "My turn," Leona roared. She activated her berserk aura and swung her good, powerful left arm. Her gauntlet, wreathed in blood-red energy, hit the worm's tough hide like a cannonball. Crack! The outer segment of the worm's head shattered, spraying dark fluids. The worm shrieked and recoiled in pain. Meanwhile, Lyra and Isabel focused on the dwarven flank. "Lyra, blind them. Isabel, follow through," Damien commanded. Lyra, agile and silent, dashed up the nearest dune. Her gray skin shimmered. and a dark emerald bow materialized. Twang twang. Two phantom arrows shot out, silent and invisible. They slammed into the tiny black eyes of two worms, instantly dissolving the visual receptors. "Blind worms, young master," Lyra yelled. Isabel screamed, tapping into her gravity manipulation. Gravity shock. The ground beneath the two blind worms instantly multiplied its mass. The creatures, paralyzed, slammed into the earth, their heads splitting open from the sudden, crushing internal force. 3 down. Damien turned to the remaining 6, 3 fighting Leona, 3 battering the dwarves. He didn't waste mana. He moved with the precision Aelinor had drilled into him. He vanished using Shadow Step and reappeared above the nearest worm fighting Leona. Dual Art Golden Blade. His sword, coated in a layer of rigid, dense golden aura, tore through the air. He sliced down, aiming for the soft, fleshy underside of the worm's segment. WHICK. The worm was cut cleanly in half, its front section crashing into the sand, writhing before collapsing. Leona laughed, energized by the kill. She smashed the second worm with a devastating right-handed uppercut. 5 down, come on, dwarves, Leona yelled, turning her attention to the final 3 attacking the convoy. Damien looked at the dwarves' position. They were exhausted. Their formation was breaking. Isabel, get them out of there. Isabel launched herself into a full run toward the struggling dwarves. She ran right past the 3 remaining worms, which lunged at her. Gravity pull. Isabel screamed, pouring her mana into the spell. The 3 worms suddenly jerked back, pulled by an invisible, powerful force that slammed their heads together. Bang! The 3 worms reeled, stunned. Isabel reached the dwarves' shield wall. Move, she yelled, grabbing the nearest dwarf by his massive beard. You're coming with me. Using her enhanced speed and strength, Isabel tore the 3 remaining dwarves out of the battle zone and dragged them back toward Damien, leaving the 3 stunned worms exposed. Lyra took advantage of the opening. Phantom arrows flew, silent, invisible, and lethal, taking out the final 3 worms in rapid succession. Silence fell over the sands of Drollgar. 9 colossal worms lay dead, their fluids steaming on the hot sand. Damien put his sword away and surveyed the scene. His team was breathing hard but whole. The 3 rescued dwarves, stocky men with intricate metal facial hair and oil-stained armor, stared at the silver-haired boy and the 3 terrifying women who had appeared out of nowhere to save them. The lead dwarf, wearing a cracked helmet, stepped forward. His expression was a mix of awe and suspicion. "Who in the fiery pits are ye?" the dwarf demanded, hefting a massive, multi-barreled rifle. "And what in the forge fire magic did he just do?" Damien smiled, bowing slightly. "My name is Damien Voss. I am an associate of King Durin, and we are here to hire the finest engineers in Ilias." He pointed toward the nearest horizon, where a pillar of smoke suggested they weren't far from the dwarven cities. "Now lead us to your king." The lead dwarf, whose helmet was cracked from the worm attack, frowned. He looked at Damien, then at his subordinates, then back at Damien. "Never heard of it." Damien blinked. In the Dragon Empire, the name Voss was enough to make bobbies stop crying and nobles wet themselves. It was synonymous with darkness, power, and fear. To hear someone say, "never heard of it," was refreshing, but also problematic. "It's a human noble house," Damien explained smoothly, wiping worm blood from his sleeve. "My father is Thuron Voss. He is an old friend of King Durin." "Friend of the king," the dwarf scoffed, spitting on the sand. "Every human who comes to the border claims to be the king's long-lost cousin. Listen, lad, you saved our lives, and for that the Ironclan owes you a debt. But debt or no debt, the law is the law." He gestured to his men. The surviving dwarves leveled their rifles, not at the worms but at Damien. "The border is sealed. No humans allowed. especially not armed ones with whatever that was. He eyed Leona and Isabel warily. If you want to enter the dwarf empire, you do it as prisoners. We'll take you in for questioning. If your story checks out, you drink ale with us. If it doesn't, you rot. He pulled out a pair of heavy, rune-inscribed iron shackles. Hands. You dare. Leona stepped forward, a low growl rumbling in her chest. Her berserk aura flared, red mist leaking from her gauntlets. You point weapons at the one who saved you. I should snap your... Leona down. Damien's voice was calm, but it carried the weight of a command. But young lord, they are insulting you. These shackles, they don't seem normal. I know, Damien smiled, but his eyes were cold. He looked at the nervous dwarves. He could kill them all in seconds. Lyra could snipe them before they pulled a trigger. Isabel could crush them. But that would defeat the purpose. He needed allies, not more enemies. It's just protocol, Leona, Damien said, stepping forward and offering his wrists. Besides, I'd like to see if their iron is strong enough to hold me. The lead dwarf hesitated, intimidated by the boy's calmness, before snapping the shackles onto Damien's wrists. Click. The runes glowed. Damien felt his mana connection dampen slightly. Suppressing cuffs, crude but effective against third orders, useless intent. Remembering their effects from the novel, Damien's eyes narrowed slightly. Smart choice, the dwarf grunted, though he looked relieved he didn't have to fight. Load them up, we head to the wall. The iron wall, dwarven border. An hour later, the convoy crested the final dune. Damien had read about it in the novel, but seeing it in person was different. The iron wall wasn't just a wall. It was a mechanical mountain range. Standing 300 feet tall, it was a seamless barrier of black steel and stone, stretching as far as the eye could see. Massive smokestacks belched gray clouds into the sky. Gears the size of houses turned slowly in the walls, powering unseen mechanisms. And on top of the battlements, massive cannons, mana artillery, were aimed down at the desert. Impressive, Damien muttered. It makes me feel like I'm in more of a steampunk world than fantasy, truly a race built to create. The convoy stopped at the massive main gate. A squad of border guards wearing heavier, cleaner armor than the convoy marched out. Their captain, a dwarf with a beard braided with gold rings, looked at Damien with undisguised disgust. Humans, the captain spat. Why did you bring them here, Borg? You know the order, shoot on sight. They saved the shipment, Captain, Borg, the convoy leader, argued, and he claims to know the king. The king is indisposed, the captain snapped, and the regent has ordered a total lockdown, no exceptions. The captain walked up to Damien. He looked at the shackles, then at Damien's waist. Strip him. The command hung in the air. Excuse me, Damien asked, his smile fading. You heard me, the captain sneered. Standard procedure for spies. Hand over all magical artifacts, the spatial bag, the communication stones, the weapons, and... He pointed at the void gem on Damien's neck. That necklace, hand it over, it will be confiscated as evidence. The air dropped 20 degrees. The void gem contained everything. His parents left him before disappearing. It was Damien's entire life. It was his last memories. Yet someone wanted to take it from him. How could that be possible? No, Isabel stepped forward, her hands igniting with flames. You will not touch the young master. As Damien's maid, she knew what the void gem represented. How dare someone try and take it? Unknowingly, she got so angry that her horns became exposed. Demon, a dwarf yelled, stepping backwards in shock. As for captain, he just glanced at her in disdain. Step back, demon bitch, the captain drew his hammer. Behind him, 50 guards raised their rifles. The mana cannons on the wall swiveled down, locking onto them. I said hand it over, the captain roared, or we'll turn you into paste right here. Damien looked at the captain. The amusement was gone from his face. Ever since he had come to this world as a villain, he had always imagined that he was the one who took things. He did not give things. I tried to be polite. I tried to play by your rules, but you want my money, you want my secrets. Damien's eyes shifted. The blue was swallowed by gold and black. The shackles on his wrists began to vibrate. Should I kill them? I can break these cuffs in a second. Lyra can take the cannons. Leona can break the gate. We can force our way in. Or do I use the letter? He hesitated. Using Eleanor's letter now might work, but it would reveal his hand to the regent before he even met the king. I advise you to reconsider, Damien said softly, his voice amplified by a trace of mana will. If you touch the gem, you'll lose your hand. Is that a threat? The captain laughed. You are in chains, boy. How dare you be arrogant? He reached for the necklace. Stop! A voice, hoarse and exhausted, echoed from the top of the gate. Clank whir hiss. The sound of heavy machinery moving drew everyone's attention. A platform lowered from the wall. Standing on it was a dwarf, but not a soldier. He was young for a dwarf, his beard only just starting to thicken. He wore a leather apron covered in grease, oil stains, and soot. He looked like he hadn't slept in a week. Goggles were strapped to his forehead, and he held a strange, half-finished mechanical device in his hand. Dwarf Prince Hephaestus. What is the meaning of this delay? Hephaestus shouted, his voice cracking with fatigue. I need that shipment of mithril. The prototype is failing because the alloy is trash. Prince, the captain bowed hastily. We caught some human spies. They were trying to smuggle. Spies? Hephaestus rubbed his eyes, looking down at the group. He looked at the dead worms being hauled by the convoy. He looked at the shattered head of one worm, crushed by a fist. He looked at the clean hole in another, sniped by wind. Then his eyes landed on Damien. Not on his face, on the shackles. Specifically, the way the runes on the shackles were flickering, destabilized by Damien's aura. Hephaestus froze. He adjusted his goggles, leaning over the railing. That interference pattern, Hephaestus muttered, that's not normal mana. He looked at the captain. Bring them in now. But sir, the regent said. I don't care what my uncle said. Hephaestus roared, throwing a wrench at the captain. I need engineers who understand mana density, and that human. He's overriding the suppression cuffs just by standing there. The prince pointed a greasy finger at Damien. You human, can you hold a wrench, Prev? Next, can you hold a wrench? The question hung in the hot, smoky air of the border gate. Damien looked at the greasy, disheveled dwarf prince standing on the platform. Hephaestus didn't look like royalty. He looked like a mechanic who hadn't slept in a week. His eyes were bloodshot behind his goggles, and his hands were stained black with oil. But Damien saw something else. He saw desperation. I can hold a wrench, Damien said, stepping forward, the shackles on his wrists still flickering erratically. But I think you need someone who can hold a circuit. Hephaestus's eyes narrowed. A circuit, you know artificer theory. I know that your suppression cuffs are failing because they are tuned to a standard mana frequency, Damien said, lifting his hands. My mana is denser. It's creating a feedback loop in the runic script. If you don't unlock them in about 10 seconds, they are going to explode. Recalling information from the original novel, plus the bits he had understood from the Voss library, at least based on theory alone, he was an armature craftsman. It was also because of this that he believed his idea to culturally invade this world with blue star technology was going to be a huge success. And as if on cue, following his words, the iron cuffs began to whine. The red light of the runes turned a dangerous, unstable white. Shit, Hephaestus cursed, jumping down from the platform with surprising agility. He pulled a complex multi-tool from his belt. Don't move. If that detonates, it'll take your hands off. Unlock it, Damien ordered calmly. Hephaestus jammed the tool into the lock mechanism. He twisted it, muttering curses in Dwarvish. Click hiss. The shackles popped open, releasing a cloud of steam. They fell to the ground dead. Hephaestus let out a breath, wiping sweat from his forehead. He looked at Damien with a new intensity. You knew exactly when the overload point was, Hephaestus muttered. You aren't just a regular noble, are you? Voss, was it? I think I heard my father say that name once or twice, the prince muttered. However, Damien just smiled slightly. Something like that, Damien rubbed his wrists. Damien Voss, and these are my assistants. He pointed to Isabel, Lyra, and Leona. Voss, Hephaestus chewed on the name. The more he thought of the name, the more information came to mind. After a minute or two of thinking, he finally remembered why the name sounded so familiar. The human dark mages. My father mentioned them. He said Thuron Voss was the only human who could drink him under the table. The prince stood up, looking at the captain of the guard. Captain, clear them, they are with me. But Prince, the captain protested, his hand still on his hammer. The regent's orders were absolute, no humans, especially not. I am the prince, Hephaestus roared, his voice cracking. And I am the chief artificer of this project. If I say I need them to fix the prototype, then they are essential personnel. Do you want to explain to my uncle why the Guardian project failed because you arrested the only person who understands mana density? The captain paled. The Guardian project was obviously a sore spot. Fine, the captain spat. But if they are spies, it's your head, Prince. It's always my head, Hephaestus grumbled. He turned to Damien. Get in the lift, we're going down. The lift descending into the city. The platform they stood on wasn't pulled by ropes. It was driven by massive, grinding gears and pistons powered by steam. As they descended past the iron wall, the view opened up. Isabel gasped. Leona's eyes went wide. Even Lyra, who was used to the grandeur of the world tree, stared in silence. The dwarven capital wasn't like a regular city. It was a machine. Built inside the hollowed-out crater of a massive, dormant volcano, the city was a sprawling metropolis of brass, iron, and steam. Pipes the size of rivers ran along the walls, carrying magma and water. Massive cogs turned slowly in the background, powering thousands of factories. Airships, crude, blimp-like vessels held aloft by mana balloons, drifted through the smog. The streets were lit not by torches, but by glowing mana lamps. Welcome to Ironfort, Hephaestus said, pride leaking into his tired voice. The city of gears. It's loud, Leona commented, her ears twitching at the constant clank-hiss thud of the industry. It's the sound of progress, Hephaestus said. He looked at Damien. You said you know why the cuffs failed. Does that mean you understand mana conductivity? I know that you are trying to bridge the gap between magic and mechanics, Damien said, looking at the city. You are trying to build machines that run on mana batteries instead of coal, but you're having trouble with the conversion rate. The mana burns out the engines. Hephaestus dropped his wrench. It clattered loudly on the metal floor. How, the prince whispered. That's a state secret. How do you know about the burnout issue? Damien smiled. He knew it because he had read the novel. The dwarves spent 10 years trying to fix the burnout before they finally invented the mana combustion engine. I told you, Damien tapped his temple. I'm an engineer, and I have a blueprint that can fix your problem. Hephaestus looked at him. The suspicion in his eyes vanished, replaced by the fanatical hunger of a scientist. If you can fix the burnout, Hephaestus stepped closer, grabbing Damien's hand with his greasy gloves. I will give you anything. Gold, mithril, weapons, anything. I don't want gold, Damien said, letting his golden dragon aura leak out just enough to show he was serious. I want to see the king. Hephaestus flinched. The excitement drained from his face, replaced by a deep, dark worry. He let go of Damien's hand and looked away. "My father," Hephaestus whispered. "He isn't seeing anyone right now." "Is he sick?" Damien pressed. Hephaestus hesitated, looking around to make sure no one was listening. "He's sleeping. He hasn't woken up in 3 months, and his skin, it's turning gray." Damien's eyes narrowed. Gray skin, coma, unwakeable. It sounded like a familiar poison in the novel. Abyss poison, Damien realized. The same poison the Twilight Association uses. Something isn't right here. However, despite his suspicion, Damien did not say anything. Rather, he planned to use this information to his advantage. "Take me to him," Damien said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I can wake him up." Hephaestus looked at Damien. He saw the confidence in the human's blue eyes. He saw the terrifying strength of his companions. "If you are lying," Hephaestus said quietly, "my uncle will kill us both." "He can try," Damien smirked. The lift hit the bottom floor with a heavy thud. "Follow me," Hephaestus said, "and keep your hoods up. The city has eyes." Clank, hiss, thud. The lift ground to a halt at the bottom level of Ironforge. When they were high above, looking down from the iron wall, the city had looked like a marvel of engineering, a glowing, churning beast of brass and steam. But down here in the streets, it looked like a prison. "Watch your step," Hephaestus warned, stepping over a puddle of oil that shimmered with a sickly rainbow sheen. "The drainage systems haven't been maintained in months. The Regent diverted all the maintenance mana to the weapon factories." Damien pulled his hood tight, his eyes scanning the surroundings as instructed. Fortunately, it seemed the cloaks Aelinor had given them had a bit of a stealth function, so they didn't stand out too much. The air was thick with smog that tasted of sulfur and unwashed bodies. The towering brass buildings that looked majestic from above were stained with soot and grime at street level. And the people. They passed a row of workshops. The doors were open, revealing hundreds of dwarves working assembly lines. They weren't singing or drinking ale like in the stories. They were silent. Their faces were gaunt, their eyes hollow. They moved like automatons, hammering metal in a soulless rhythm. "This doesn't look like a golden age," Leona muttered, her nose wrinkling at the smell of despair. "It smells like the slaver pits." Thinking of her past when she was still captured under Vargas's men, Leona recalled the lifeless eyes of the other slaves around her. The current town gave her such a feeling. To which Isabel and Lyra, hearing this, also nodded. Something didn't sit right with them about the city. "It wasn't always like this," Hephaestus said as he noticed their thoughts, his voice bitter. He looked at a statue of his father, King Durin, that had now been defaced with graffiti. "Before my father fell ill, the forges were for art, for creation. Now, we just build cannons and build walls." He clenched his wrench until his knuckles turned white. "Since my uncle took over as regent, he calls it efficiency. I call it slavery." "Hey, give it back." A high-pitched shout cut through the noise of the steam vents. Damien stopped. He looked down an alleyway to his left. 3 burly, teenage dwarves, wearing the armbands of the city guard youth, were surrounding 2 smaller figures. A small, dwarf boy, no older than 10, stood defiantly in front of a little girl who was clutching a rusted mechanical toy. He was bleeding from a cut on his forehead, holding a broken pipe like a sword. "Get lost, scrap rat," the leader of the bullies laughed, kicking the boy in the stomach. Bam! The boy flew back, hitting the wall, but he scrambled up immediately, spitting blood. "Don't touch her," the boy screamed, his voice trembling but fierce. "That's our father's property, you can't take it." "It's contraband," the bully sneered. "Scrap metal belongs to the regent. Hand it over or we'll take your hand instead." He raised a heavy iron club. The little girl started to cry. Hephaestus growled, reaching for his multi-tool. Those bastards. Wait, Damien put a hand on the prince's shoulder. Let us handle it. You are a prince. If you intervene, it becomes a political incident. If we intervene, it's just a street fight. Not wanting to attract unnecessary eyes, Damien knew he could not allow this hot-headed prince to flare things up. Thinking of this, he looked at Isabel. Hungry. Isabel's eyes flashed red. She hated bullies. She hated people who hurt children. It reminded her of the cage she was found in. Starving, she whispered. She didn't use magic. She didn't need to for such a small group of bullies. Only her fists were enough. Thinking of that, she walked into the alley. Hey, the bully shouted, turning around. This is official Busin. Slap. Isabel didn't bother to listen to him and backhanded him on the spot. Crack. The sound was like a whip. The bully spun 360 degrees in the air before face-planting into the mud, unconscious. The other two bullies froze. They looked at the maid who was smiling sweetly at them. My young master doesn't like noise, Isabel said, cracking her knuckles. And you are being very noisy. Monster. The bullies scrambled over their fallen leader and ran, their official business forgotten. Isabel sighed, dusting off her hands. She turned to the two terrified children. Are you okay? The boy lowered his pipe, eyeing her warily. We don't have any money. I don't want money. Isabel reached into her apron pocket. She pulled out two large, steaming meat buns she had bought from a street vendor earlier. She always carried snacks given her ravenous appetite. Here, she handed one to the girl and one to the boy. Eat. You can't fight if you're empty. The girl hesitated, then snatched the bun and devoured it. The boy looked at Isabel, then at the bun, tears welling in his eyes. Thank you, big sister, he whispered. Damien walked up, flanked by Leona and Lyra. He looked at the boy. The kid had spirit. Go home, kid, Damien flicked a gold coin to the boy. Hide that toy. The streets aren't safe tonight. As the kids ran off, clutching their food and their treasure, Damien turned to Hephaestus. The amusement was gone from his face. Hephaestus, Damien said, his voice dropping to a serious whisper. We need to talk. About what? About your uncle, Damien said, gesturing to the grim city around them. This isn't just bad leadership, starving the people, purging the loyalists, hoarding weapons. Damien looked up at the palace that loomed over the city, wreathed in black smoke. That's not how a regent acts when he's guarding the throne, Damien said coldly. That's how a usurper acts when he's preparing for a war. Hephaestus's face turned sour. The grease on his cheeks couldn't hide the sudden pallor of his skin. He looked around nervously, then motioned for them to follow him quickly. Not here, the prince hissed, his voice trembling with a mix of fear and rage. The walls have ears. I will tell you everything, but we have to get to the workshop first. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and like the video and comment down if anything wrong in the story, and if have any suggestion to a new novel or want next part of any series, comment down.